Today, we're talking to Dylan Jacques, CPTO at the Telegraph, about how newsrooms are harnessing and navigating the power of AI. Thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring this episode. For simple cloud and powerful AI that's built to scale, visit DigitalOcean.com or just click the link in the show notes. You're listening to Joel Beasley, Modern CTO.
I want to jump right into it, right? But let's start at the beginning. Like, what is it that you actually do at the Telegraph?
Yeah, so I'm a Chief Product and Technology Officer. So I look after our product development roadmaps and our plans and how we invest in our products, to our digital products, to deliver value to our customers. I look after our plans as to how we utilize AI, both as looking at our internal workflows, how we can work better, more effectively, but also as we all as companies move into a different era, how we can use AI as a tool for growth. And I've championed a lot of our approach, building AI into how we operate and really building the organization of the future. So that's a big part of my role. But also the technology part is we have all the usual systems and engineering and products to support and make sure that they run effectively and that we build them effectively. So really our whole digital ecosystem. We're a subscriptions-led organization, but we also have a lot of things like advertising, lots of complexity to look after that all comes together that really creates revenue for the organization. So it's sort of quite an interesting, dynamic, fast-paced, complicated but interesting part of how to run a modern news publisher.
So how do you think news is the newspaper model? How is that changing with AI?
Well, I think that almost every business really is having to reinvent themselves to a certain extent, and the news publishing industry is no strangers to general disruption, and AI isn't a huge amount different. So we've been through print to digital to then and our audience is moving online to lots of different revenue streams, the online ad model changing how products are developed, all the way through to that moving to a subscriptions model. And these are all changes that have caused us to really reinvent how we get revenue and how we sustain the journalism itself. And AI is the latest mega trend, and it really is impacting all organizations, as I say, but it's impacting publishing in all sorts of different ways. From the fact that the market has fundamentally shifted. People are used to using tools like ChatGPT now, and I've never seen a technology that has been adopted as quickly with such an exponential growth curve as AI in my whole career. We've seen lots of things. I mean, smartphones is the other disruption, and that change of consumption patterns. But this really. And I was talking to another publisher recently, and they were saying that the impressions of their content on these platforms has been doubling literally every month, and the amount of growth. And I was on the train this morning and walked down the carriage, and every other person was on ChatGPT asking it questions. How was my day? Like, that was just a year ago. That was just totally not the case. That's going to have an enormous impact on the amount of eyeballs that end up on news, how people go after information, and the implications for the sector are huge. But there is, I'm an optimist, I suppose, generally about it, and I think that the news industry is very adept at adapting to these changes, and there is enormous amount of growth and productivity potential in using AI tools. I think it's going to enable us to produce far more at a far higher quality. Ultimately, like we need to think thoughtfully about how we use AI, and we need to protect the fact that really, journalism at its core is a high quality, human produced premium product. But I think the tools that are going to be at journalists' disposal to do things like deep research, to interrogate, massive databases of information and ask the right questions to get to the heart of the story, their means to do that is going to be massively improved. So I'm quite excited that we're going to hopefully get to a new era of being able to have human-led, but with AI tools, much more breadth and much higher quality, and maybe more creativity too. But that has to obviously be done in the right way. That's not using AI for AI's sake and diluting the journalism, which is ultimately the core. I think AI tools are very good at making sense of things, and but they can never, AI tools are terrible at asking the right questions. And I think journalists are brilliant at asking the right, often challenging questions.
Until we build a model that's specifically designed to ask the right questions. No, so, all right, I want to talk about this. You brought up a bunch of interesting points. The one that I want to zero in on is the adaptation, right? So the industries have adapted, right? When you went from print to digital and all of that. And it seems as if you could think about it like the newspaper was the original UI, right? And so you controlled the UI, you controlled the content and the UI, people went and paid for it and picked it up. Then the UI kind of went digital. Like instead of the paper, now I have a screen in front of me. And that's a pretty easy transition. Take all the content that was on the paper and put it on the screen. You can have people come to your screen. But now what's happening for me personally, and like you said, how you watch people on the train or how I watch myself use technology, I noticed that I stopped even going to X. I just go to Grok now and say, hey, because there's too much junk on X, like too much negative stuff on X. But with Grok, I can say, hey, give me the top 5 stories, do a slightly positive tone to it. Like I don't want horrible things in my feed, and it'll just bump out like exactly what I want for the news. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And so now that sort of human part of me that's curious about what's going on outside of my little bubble of my family is now satisfied. And so the reason why I'm bringing this up is because the newspaper to screen change, that seems pretty simple. The per purchase of paper to subscription change, that seems pretty simple. But the fact that they're not even I'm not even going to this, I'm going to this other entirely new thing. Are you guys working licensing deals with like the Groks and the Chat GPTs to include your content? Is that a revenue stream for it to stay relevant? How does that all work?
Some publishers are, and but you are right. I mean, it's everything's changing at once in the example that you've given. Both how things are consuming, both how we monetize news is changing, and personally, I see a world where news, I think that a world where a news provider such as ourselves or anybody is a sort of content stream into an LLM, be that Grok, OpenAI, or whatever it is. I think for a customer that's not a great result. I think that you don't want a world where you're consuming information, but it is quite generalized by the platforms, and you're consuming it in a similar way. And I think it's quite important for news publishers to have a direct relationship with our customers. For the simple reason of trust. So the minute that everybody starts reading our content through a lens of a third party, there's another company in the mix that is presenting the content on our behalf. And for me, there are trust issues to that. And even that said, you have to recognize that what you've described is how you consume, and your expectations as to how you consume information has changed, and you're not necessarily interested in the same thing that all of our other readers are, and you're expecting a personalized feed, not necessarily even a feed, but you're expecting a personalized experience it's either answering the specific need that you've got, that particular question, that particular time, or it's at least dialed into the types of things that you like. It's anticipating what you would like, and it's bringing you quite relevant things. I think if we're solving to that problem, I think publishers can still solve to that using tools, and whether that is, the Telegraph app has an agent which knows you extremely well and gets you direct access to our news. I think publishers can absolutely still deliver that in the same way that we've adapted all of our products to shifting consumer trends for some time. This is a major one, but we can still adapt to that. I think a world where absolutely everybody gets their news from one place, one interface, one app, and there are just like a number of sources to feed into that. I don't know about that.
No, I don't think that'll happen. No. I am optimistic too. And I did like the point you made earlier about premium content. So the fact that you can know, like, and trust some very specific source and you're willing to pay for it, that model has been proven. It's been proven through the citizen journalism. It's been proven through your own subscription model. People build this trust with this organization or person, and then they're willing to pay for it. I think as the AI rises, and I believe that there will, and you could tell me what your thoughts are on this, like if you think I'm crazy or not. But I think we're going to have another major shift when the deep fakes become real time good. So for example, when it's so good that you can't tell if it's me right now or if it's my AI twin that I sent, like I think that'll happen in the next 3 years. And I think when that does happen, it's going to create a massive cultural shift where we'll start doing business more in person, like at conferences and things like that. Because once we reach that threshold of not being able to tell, then it's going to create an enormous amount of trust issues with everything.
I totally agree. And you're right. I think that we are not far away from a world where it's quite hard to see the wood through the trees. And it's quite hard to discern between what is a trusted fact and what is just some. Like I asked ChatGPT something, they get better at sources, but like it is unclear where it has learned that information from, that it's providing. And I think that there will be a counterculture to it, and I think that there will be ultimately a premium on well researched, human collated to, myself and other publishers work to high journalistic standards that are just not going to exist on these platforms. Some organizations
in a tweet, right?
Yeah. An organization needs to ensure the enforcement of journalistic standards, and that's what a news brand is. Like, we're talking a lot about how things are consumed and how information is consumed, but if you're getting your information from just one bucket that is pulling that from, scraping it from a news source, pulling it from Reddit, combining it all together and predicting it, like then you're a million miles away from what we'd think of as a reliable news source. A million miles away. That's not news. That's information that's been smashed together from 1,000 different places. And whilst that might be a great solution for, right, I'm having a conversation with my boss this afternoon, how should I phrase something? That can be handled. That's just language in the right way. But when it is, when we're talking about we did a story recently on our deputy prime minister who then resigned. Like, when we talk about holding governments to account, like there has to be a much higher standard to that, and the LLMs are not going to do that.
How far? So I think most people would say that having a conversation with a nuclear scientist, like a really well-trained LLM on that data, you can have a pretty detailed conversation and get some value. You can bounce ideas if you're a nuclear scientist and you're trying to bounce some ideas. And so that works. How far do you think we are away from the LLM being as good as a human reporter?
Well, I think that from the sort of standards of information gathering, the way that people talk about this is, we're at like post-grad level or undergraduate level right now, and like we're getting to a point in 2030 where they're going to be like professor level, and the line that you cross is that they are going to be more capable than the most intelligent human at that particular thing, because it's been trained on a whole corpus of research. And if you're a professor of whatever, and there's a whole detailed syllabus and there is a whole background reading, I can see where you get to the point where you can ask questions in an effective way, and somebody's going to be, in inverted commas, expert in that thing. But you got to think of journalism as a slightly different concept to that. We have reporters that are stood on the ground, on the front line of the Ukraine conflict, and are interviewing people and are getting a sense of what's the impact of conflict in these countries. And it goes back to my point as well on how do you break new ground, not just be an expert in previous events. How do you ask the right questions? How do you and there is a lot of personal relationships to journalism being plugged into the government, and I think that I would view having an academic understanding of a subject is slightly different from the act of going and creating journalism.
Yeah, and you will definitely have that natural corporal delay, because these AI LLMs can't go walk physically to, at least without like a human counterpart recording or something of that nature. But there will be some delay. That's why I'm generally optimistic, and nothing really is happening like overnight. It usually takes a little bit, because human behavior takes some time to change. I do want to talk with you. I saw this interview you did last year about 12 AI products in 12 months. So I'm going to ask you for an update on that. But first, I wanted to chat with you about quantum metric, because that's how we got introduced. So how do you know quantum metric?
Yeah, so we have been working with quantum metric for a few years, and I can't remember how we were introduced precisely, but it wasn't through myself, in fact. But I was interested in the technology, and being interested in how we evolve our products. It's the first time I've seen as powerful tools sort of really, like, typically what we have and a lot of organizations have are a lot of after the fact reporting. And like the problem at the time was, often what's happening on our products right now, and trying to get an understanding of, okay, if we change this, what would the impact to user behavior be straight away? Like, publishers and we typically did that by looking at a load of reports, changing something, waiting a few months, looking at a load of reports again. And I think it's the first time I'd seen genuinely real time being able to actually see and analyze like our customers' experience within our products. And that was a huge leap forward at the time. And we're also able to trace through where we've got points of friction in our products. And if we're able to change that, fix that, what would that mean in terms of knock-on engagement? And then what would that mean in terms of revenue? So it was the first time we would be able to actually use tools to think about that, rather than many months of like after the fact analysis.
Oh, nice. So from a business perspective, like other CTOs and VPs of engineering, those types of people are listening. What is like the one reason why you would like recommend they even take a look at quantum metric? Like, what's the problem they'd be experiencing, or what's the business value they would communicate to their C-level peers? I
think that understanding the business value of a change to your UX, and that sounds quite a fuzzy thing to say, but if you're an airline and you've got thousands and thousands of e-commerce journeys, and the fact that you having the facility to be able to see at volume like this delay or this UX not being quite right is we can see a pattern in real time that it is causing a load of customers to falter, and some of them eventually work it out and move on. Some of them give up. If he is to fix that, what would that mean for your business? Like,
that's a pretty good value prop.
like that being able to do that gets you out of like, I think a lot of organizations get into the trap of you try and manage a product development plan, and there's a lot of opinion based sort of stuff. Like, I think it's really important to do this. I think it's really important that we do this. I think, in this world, that there is a lot of data, a lot of customers. Like, you really need a data driven, objective view for, right, if I was to change these 5 things, you can go into tools now and say, right, put these errors that are on our site, put them in order of business value. These friction points, put them in order of business value, and your teams can start working through those in the right order that hits the biggest returns first. Like, I think that's a problem that absolutely everybody has, and you need the right tools to be able to deal with that.
That's true, because there's no shortage of logs and things that are wrong.
No.
But being able to organize them from business value sounds like the thing you would want to do. Very cool.
Indeed.
Real quick, before we continue, I wanted to give a special shout out to DigitalOcean for sponsoring this episode. DigitalOcean is cloud infrastructure that's simple to spin up, complete with integrated AI dev tools, plus 99.99% uptime SLAs and industry-leading pricing on bandwidth. We all know DigitalOcean. It's super reliable. It's been around forever. And now with DigitalOcean's Gradient platform, developers can train, fine-tune, deploy, and scale AI workloads all in one place. DigitalOcean is reliable and affordable at any budget. Companies can save up to 30% on their cloud bill when they come to DigitalOcean. Use code DO25 and get $200 in free credits to get started. Simple cloud, powerful AI, built to scale. That's DigitalOcean.
Now, back to the episode.
All right, so 12 AI products in 12 months. I feel like I might be holding your feet to the fire. Is that something that you said in an interview last year?
Yeah, no, it is. It is, yes. So it sounds like one of those promises that you make in an interview, and then like he hold you to account for it for the next 5 years. So that was we, like, again, a lot of organizations, we spent a bit of time trying to make sense of like what sort of, when Gen AI hit 3 years ago, everyone sort of took a bit of a beat to say, what does this mean for us? How should we handle it? What should our policy be? And no one really knew how fast it was going to accelerate. And at the time, there was quite a lot of talk about policy, quite a lot of talk about how we should separate what we do from AI, and how we should think about it. And so really what I wanted to do is the concept of 12 in 12 months was it's really about how you deliver at speed. So one of the consequences of AI, again, to everybody, is that the current or old way of developing software and building new experiences now has to change, because we are not going to be able to do it fast enough to operate competitively in a world with organizations like OpenAI and others. Like, people can spin up an app and a website without any knowledge of coding, like, very easily now. And like, so how we build products will have to change. 12 in 12 months was an effort to say, right, okay, whatever we do, we don't know all the answers to how AI needs to transform our company. We don't know exactly that if we say, right, we're going to build 12 things over the next year, that 10 of them will still be live in 2 years' time. But it is not just about what you develop. It's about building a muscle. It's about building capability, and it's just about getting going and how to do things fast. So I think we're in a world where, regardless of how you get it done, I think you're going to need to be shipping a major feature every month at least, and doing that on a disciplined, regular basis. And hopefully they're the right ideas. Some of them might be the wrong ideas, but there is really no, there is no, oh, that didn't work. It is all muscle. It is all capability. And even if you launch something and you think, well, no one, customers didn't engage with that, there might be a slightly different use case using similar capability that you launch in 2 months' time, and at least you've moved the ball forward and you've got teams used to doing this. And really, it was a bit of an effort to just get going as fast as really you can. And at the end of 12 months, you'll have delivered 12 things. You know what have worked, what hadn't worked, and you're better placed to tackle the following year.
How did the team respond to that? Were they pretty pumped up for it?
Yeah, so all the managers thought you were massively overcommitting. So all my colleagues were like, "You're setting yourself up for massive fall here."
They started calling you Elon Musk. Okay, Elon.
Take me to Mars. And the team thought it was a little bit ambitious, but actually it was okay. And like the key thing that it really does is right sizes what you are biting, but you're biting things off on the in the right chunks, and this isn't like deliver some like tiny and these are all AI tools, features, experiences, some of them sort of products, but really it was, we have to get used to the fact that we're going to have to deliver things on a cycle like that, and first couple challenging. But actually after a while, like, people got used to it. It was very clear that we were expecting a launch at the end of the month. There was no drift. There was no like, we hadn't thought about the launch plan. We have to think about a launch plan every month at the same time. So you end up with a sort of formula that like, it's week 3 of my month. We haven't actually agreed the launch plan for this thing. Like, we need to get on with that. And it effectively establishes a cadence that then everything has to work to. You start something, you think, actually, this is really, really complicated and this is going to take a little while. You quite quickly have to work out, what we have a broad backlog of problems that we're all trying to solve, and if we think this one is really too big, you need to have something else to swap it with quite quickly, and like getting the team to just at all costs preserve that 12-month cycle with whatever it is, and get going was the key, really.
Do you think it was a net positive?
Yeah, I absolutely think it was a net positive. I think that we with AI, you want to hedge your bets in as many directions as possible, and you could very easily fall into the trap of delivering 1 or 2 major releases over a year. And the issue there is that you're if that one thing doesn't work, then that's all you got. If you're delivering 12 things, some of those are going to work, and if they don't, you're figuring out, right, where was the value, why was that? You're learning 12 lessons. You're learning, you've got 12 different parts of your technology stack that can now work in different ways. You've got a lot to build on. The downside to it all was we did end up with like 12 things that we then had to manage. So you also have to be quite disciplined about what you turn off at the end of that as well.
So I've got some questions about generative AI and how that's impacting publishers, specifically for like you and me as CTOs, right? So in both of our countries, you're in the UK, correct? So both of our countries, we have a concept of free speech, but there is limitations in both the countries. One of the largest ones is incitement of violence. That's a common one. And my question here is, with these AI models, like if one of them goes off the rails, are they jailing the CTOs? Do they have laws? The UK tends to be pretty good about making laws ahead of time, like at least moving faster than a lot of other countries. Are they legislating anything around this? Like what happens if you're a publisher, you have an AI and it starts hallucinating things that are jailable speech? Like who do they come after for that, or who is responsible? How does that work? Have they outlined it yet?
I mean, look, I don't think it is totally clear. However, I'm operating on the firm assumption that if we publish something under the banner of our business, there's a level of responsibility around that, and we try and have human in the loop. And more than anything, like we should not be in our output have an automated, unchecked feed of from an LLM. Like you like. That's not what we do. Like, if you want that, just go to the LLM. Like, there is no point in us having a redirected feed from an LLM through us back to you. Like, we're not adding value really to that. But the way that I'd look at it is, it's a tool like, whether you use Google to research something, it's not Google's fault if you look something up on Google and quote it to somebody and like, oh, don't sue me, sue Google because that's where I read it. It's. I don't know whether it has to be a lot more complicated than that, really. And I think that we can use AI grade tooling and applications to be better at what we do, but I'm really not sure we should be in the business of mass-produced AI output as something our customers consume.
Oh yeah, I don't think either. I was just wondering, like, mistakes, right? Like if you have an AI agent and it kind of goes off. You've seen the agents go off the rails, just like talking to them normally, right? Or if you haven't, let me know.
No, totally. And actually, so we did an interesting. So we experimented a little bit with summaries, and so one of the problems, particularly for our younger audience, is our content can often be quite long form, quite dense, complicated geopolitical issues, and if you're on the tube or you're on your commute and you want a bit of context, a bit of lead in, like quite a high quality rich summary can be quite good, and then you can dip into the bits within that summary that like you're interested in. And I think you're going to see this more and more, whether it's audio summaries, video summaries, just like making the news more digestible, I think is the sort of problem. We can use an AI to like create a summary, but it's quite important that you ground it in the content that that we create. And the challenge becomes when it's having to fill in a gap. What it will do is it will want to just, it needs to produce the output. So it will like pencil into the gaps. And that's where you get that off the rails risk. So the way that we've looked at that is it's really a technical challenge. And if we're producing a summary of something, or any of the use case examples that I've given, and it needs to fill in the gaps, we have a grounding process that goes away and it takes the summary and it then redigests that to say, is there anything said in here that doesn't exist in all of these articles that's genuinely, we think, additive? And if the answer is yes, then it goes up a risk level and it's perhaps not included. So there are ways to try and engineer out the problem, but also test to use LLMs effectively.
I fully agree. It's an interesting thought experiment problem. So like without AIs or LLMs, you can always point back to the person. right? It was either a rogue engineer that did this, or someone had credentials and they made this change and said this thing that's like a jailable speech thing. So there would always be a trace back to a person who could be held responsible. But the moment you have an AI, who's responsible then? Like, who is it? Is it the CTO? Is it the CEO? Is it the engineer that made the mistake? Is like, where do you put responsibility? And I think that's something that will just, have to be played out in time for when it does happen. I think that's just like a court thing that will go on.
I think that there is at the moment a lack of accountability to those big technology companies in two different ways. I think that ordinarily, if a company produced a technology and that technology, led to harm in some way that led you to trace that back, I mean, it ultimately is that company that is then responsible. And we should hold those companies to account if harm is caused. The other thing is that these models have been built on information that has been scraped from people's sites without their permission, and I think that's we're still trying to get our heads around where the accountability for that lays. I think it comes down to we're moving really, really fast, and we don't really have all the answers yet on what is appropriate, what is a good model to do this well. The technology is moving faster than our ability to have good constraints around it. So I think that is just generally interesting.
I'm just trying to keep CTOs out of jail. That's oh, okay. Yeah, we're in a new world. This is going to be really fascinating to see how all of this stuff plays out. I do want to touch on a couple leadership questions as we start to wrap up. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
So one of the things I always like to ask guests is for a piece of leadership advice, but I'm going to give you a couple constraints for it. Okay. It has to be something that you were told, that you then implemented, and it stayed with you for a long time. You found it very truthy. You're like, this is great. And it's become a core part of who you are as far as a leader. What advice was that?
I think you've got to lead from the front, and that you've got to show that you are, you're setting the example, and you're not afraid to roll up your sleeves and lead from the front. I think that is ultimately. I've had the privilege to work with some really, really great leaders who have just totally led by example, and rather than being briefed on what to do and what to not do, I can see what good looks like. I can see how to operate. I can see that there is credibility there that you have to build, and you can't ask that. You just have to. That has to be how you operate. People have to just look at you, your day to day, how you conduct yourselves. Asking the right questions, setting the right example, and the people that work within your organization, that's how they will start to operate. They'll start to operate looking at you, seeing how you are and how you handle things. So I think if you want your team to be the best, you have to understand what that being the best is to you, and you have to do that all the time, and really lead from the front.
Nice. And then how did you go about, in your career, how did you become the CPTO for the Telegraph? What is it about you that allowed you to climb and grow in your career?
So always put your hand up was actually another a good thing. And I think that was something that has helped me. Just, there are always challenges, there are always new things. There might be in your role, there might be outside of your role, but being good to work with and recognizing there are all sorts of dynamic challenges. And yeah, we've all got busy day jobs, but as challenges crop up, as things, just putting your hand up for things. And when AI first started, AI broadly has been around for ages, but the sort of inflection change of a few years ago with generative AI, I saw this was an interesting move, an interesting shift, and I just wanted to get all over it. And sort of set my stall out to become the as far as I could be as deeper expert and get on with stuff there. So, I within my little area, I formed a little mini lab. Like, we were debating, should we not assign development resources to AI? Should it be a big part of our investment program? And it wasn't at the time, but I just carved out part of my team and said, right, we're just going to become the AI lab through doing stuff and starting to deliver things, and really just getting on with it.
And did the CPTO role exist before you, or did that become a creation out of the necessity of exploring these new technologies?
It existed in different respects. I mean, we sort of ended up joining two things together, but I think we sort of recognized that the two now going hand in hand, and like, we now have to be engaged in, it's not about iterating our existing way of working and our existing products. Like, we have to think about, like, what is the new way of work. You talked very, very well about how you now consume news in a completely different way. And like, will an article format even exist in 3 years? I'm not, I'm not sure, so I think we have to start thinking about how you bring everything you need together to make journalism like super relevant and our business super relevant in 10 years time. We've got to start thinking about what those problems of the future are, and just start solving for those problems, not just thinking that we're still in the old era and we just need to gradually improve.
Yeah, instead of trying to solve like 6 months down the road, solve 3 years down the road.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love this. Well, thank you so much, Dylan, for doing this. I mean, we made a podcast. How do you feel?
Very good. Very good. Reinvigorated. Ready to go and solve the big challenges.
Thank you so much for listening. And if you found this episode useful, please share it with a friend or a colleague who you think would get value from it. And if you have topics that you'd like to hear discussed on the podcast, either add me on LinkedIn or send me an email, joel@moderncto.io. Every time I get an email or LinkedIn message, it absolutely makes my day and inspires me to keep going.